One of the
Yeah.
instructors said something like, so many of us are trained to or think that our role is to give people advice or tell them what we think. And his next statement was something like, forget all of that. As a coach, your job is to do none of that. And of course, looking around the room, it was a dramatic movie. Everybody's like, what do you mean? Right. But the very first thing was the basics of coaching. Ask questions, be curious.
Meet Darren Kanthal, mountain biker, music lover, and straight shooting executive coach. As president of the Canthal Group, he spent 20 plus years helping leaders ditch the fluff and deliver real results. Darren, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, David.
I'm really excited to talk with you and to learn more about you and your story. Do you mind introducing us to your current business, your coaching business?
Well, maybe I can combine a question I bet you'll ask about maybe history a little bit. I grew up in corporate human resources. I was there about 20-ish years, not quite, maybe it was like 19. And part of my Achilles heel or my reputation, quite frankly, was that I didn't particularly play nice in the corporate sandboxes. I'm from New York, and if anyone's listening that is also from New York or knows a New Yorker, right? We can be brash, we're direct, we're loud, we're animated, we curse. And at my worst, those traits and behaviors were not always well appreciated in corporate America. When I left corporate back in 2018, I started the Canthal Group. We focus on providing executive coaching. My partner, Rachel, focuses on coaching female execs. Her background is rooted in functional nutrition, and she is exceptional, unrivaled in my opinion, at getting to root cause, whether it's the science of the body, executive leadership, and at home. Like a lot of her clients talk about their marriage, their parenthood, etc. And where I focus is primarily on coaching portfolio company executives, typically after an acquisition with a private equity firm. And what often happens is the executives at those portfolio companies used to be the founders or the top dogs, and now they work for a new top dog. And a lot of times there's some discontent or disagreement or all sorts of different things. So very
Mhm.
simply, we provide executive coaching to leaders, which a lot of executive coaches do. Our specialty is Rachel with ladies, me with the portfolio companies.
So now you've been coaching for since 2018. How did you transition into from HR into executive coaching?
Oh man. All right. So I like telling this story because it's very near and dear to me because it's my story, right? So beginning of 2018, I was working at my last corporate gig. I won't use names, but I was working for a woman who was amazing. She's still a friend of mine today, a great leader. She had been at the company for so many years, 10 or 15 years. Her blueprint was everywhere in this organization. Pretty cliche. New leadership came in. She and they did not see eye to eye. She exits, and in comes what I would describe as the worst leader I ever worked for. All of my poor behavior, all the things I had worked on up until 18, like they came screaming out again. I just couldn't get along with this woman. I hired my first coach. Her name is Chrissy. She's exceptional. And I remember at some point in the coaching, I remember saying to her, I need to figure out how to play nicer in these corporate sandboxes. And her words were, maybe you should change the sandbox. And I never really thought about changing the sandbox. So it was kind of like this mind blown or mind blowing
Mm,
experience for me. Once
yeah.
she said those words, the ball started rolling or the snowball started going downhill. I started researching what other sandboxes could be. Chrissy planted a
Mhm.
seed. Have you ever thought about being a coach? My partner, Rachel, who's also my girlfriend, we've been together 9 years. She said, what about being a coach? And there were two or three other people that also suggested it. And the more I researched it, the more I understood about the function, this
Mhm.
one-on-one opportunity plus in groups. I, I,
Yeah.
I learned after the fact, around 2020, I realized that really what's important to me is to be involved in the conversation. I have a deep
Mhm.
sense of FOMO, but when I'm involved in the conversation, there is no FOMO. I'm part of the gig, right?
Yeah.
So all of this, and I'm oversimplifying, of course, but there is a very deep, innate or intrinsic connection I have to the coaching function. Uh,
Mhm.
Also tied to that is the trust clients place in me. I've
Yeah.
literally had, not in droves, but a few clients have said to me that they tell me things they tell basically nobody else, not even their spouse
Mm.
sometimes. I mean, that's a
Mm.
hell of a responsibility.
Yeah.
And the fact that they trust me well enough for that, it's like, it gives me chills. I know where I come from, right? From college and the young Darren and all these things. And, my clients trust me
Yeah.
that much. And so I take that seriously.
When you're coaching somebody, you're really trying to get in there and dive. Sometimes you gotta really dive deep into who they are so that you can help them to become a better leader. And sometimes you gotta do a little bit of, mental gymnastics with them. And they're only gonna be willing to open up and to do that if they do trust you. And so that the fact that you can do that so well with them is speaks volumes about who you are and the way you connect with your leaders and your clients. So when you transitioned to coaching, you got into it because there are people in your life who are speaking to you about it. And actually that's probably one of the main ways most people get into coaching. Either they've been coached and the coach says this might be good, something good for you, or there's other people in their lives that just start talking about coaching. So when you started coaching, where did you start? Like, did you start with reading a book, or did you start by talking to the coach who was coaching you?
Someone recommended a book to me, and I think it was The Coaching Habit. I think that's what it
Mhm.
was. And I was reading the book, and I was a leader at the time in corporate America. And the book suggested two questions to ask your direct reports. And I still use these questions today, by the way. They were tremendous. The first question was, what is on your mind? I never heard of that question necessarily. I mean, I hear it now and it's rather commonplace in my world of coaching, but to ask a direct
Mhm.
report in a one-on-one, hey David, what's on your mind? The first time I asked it, I expected something that was going to be work related and it wasn't. It was something my direct report was dealing with personally. And I was like, whoa. And then the second question it suggested was, what else? Which any coach knows
Mhm.
is the most, popular coaching question, right? So what's on your mind? What else? And it worked so well. I was like, boom,
Mhm.
this book is on to something, coaching is on to something. So
Right.
that like started my brain thinking about this coach as a leader aspect. Now, I don't
Mhm.
remember any other books I may have read. I'm sure I read some.
Yeah.
But once I made the decision that, okay, I want to be a coach, my next steps were researching what I thought were the most popular coaching programs. I had
Mhm.
conversations with some of the schools, if you will. I spoke to
Yeah.
people that went through those schools. And then ultimately, I chose CTI, the Coactive Training Institute. And I'm glad I did. I think it was a tremendous program. I have friends from my cohort. The
Yeah.
tools are amazing. So I'm a big proponent of that program, and it was really good.
So through your program, you did the certification, they taught you how to coach. So I assume that through CTI, they had you do some peer or practice coaching with clients. Is that correct?
Yes.
How was your experience when you started to actually coach someone outside of your business role?
So I started CTI in January. In February, I put a post on Nextdoor, which is
Okay.
it's like a community website in the United States.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of like crowdsourcing, right? Like people say, I lost my dog, or stop shooting off fireworks on 4th of July. My dog's in the bathroom
Mhm.
scared, all this other crazy stuff, right? So I put a post
Yeah.
out there and said, I'm a career coach. I
Yeah.
got a client. My very first client came in
Mhm.
February. As a
Mhm.
little bit of a sidebar, I remember being really nervous. And I remember talking to Chrissy about it. I was still working with her at the time. And she said, let
Yeah.
me tell you the deepest secret. Your best job is just to listen. So
Mhm.
many people do not have an avenue where the spotlight is on them. Someone listens to
Mm.
them without telling them they're wrong or giving them all advice. Like, just listen. And I was like, okay, great.
Yeah.
The second piece of advice came from me telling Chrissy, my brain wanders. It still does to this
Yeah.
day. It wanders. I start thinking about all these things. And
Yeah.
she said, every time your brain wanders, do a tick mark on a piece of paper. So I had a pad and I was taking notes, right? So what is it, like
Yeah.
4 carrots and then the diagonal line, like those tick marks? I don't remember the exact number, but I remember it was in the high teens. My brain wandered 18 times, let's say, in 60 minutes, but it was eye-opening, right? So my
Mhm.
very first client came from next door. I think I did a good job. I felt like I did a good
Mhm.
job based upon where I was with my training. I learned very
Yeah.
early I have to stay focused because my brain wanders, and I
Yeah.
have a lot of tricks and tools that I use for that. The tick
Mhm.
marks was eye-opening.
So as you're working through and you're coaching, how did you feel like your training at CTI helped you to work with your clients? Like was there any like specific tool or framework that comes to mind when you were working with your clients that you were able to kind of ground yourself into when you were doing your work?
I don't remember the exact statement, but in
Mhm.
CTI's program when I went through it at the time, and I think it's pretty much the same today, is the very first class is fundamentals. And it's
Mhm.
exactly that. It's the fundamentals of coaching. And one of the
Yeah.
instructors said something like, so many of us are trained to or think that our role is to give people advice or tell them what we think. And his next statement was something like, forget all of that. As a coach, your job is to do none of that. And of course, like, looking around the room, if it was a dramatic movie, everybody's like, what do you mean? Right. But the very first thing was the basics of coaching. Ask questions, be curious. As I started to get a little more proficient in this training in
Yeah.
2019, it was more of a lot of, well, me and also some of my cohort, but me especially, because I live in my brain, right? I was always nervous.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know the right question to ask, or I wouldn't know where to go next. And so through the training, the
Yeah.
master coaches would say, okay, David, where should we go next? So it's
Mhm.
kind of like letting go of thinking I need all the answers or knowing exactly what to do and being okay saying, I don't know where to go. Where do you think?
Yeah.
Which also led to part of the coaching, but also part of leadership that I coach my clients on, which is you don't need all the answers.
Yeah.
When someone asks you what you think, well, hey, what do you think first? And it's not a rude thing. Some people find it like, whoa, they asked me what I think. No, hey, I'll tell
Yeah.
you what I think. What do you think first? And that's part of my
Yeah.
spiel. Like when I meet new clients, I always tell them, listen, I'm not a purist of coaching. I'm not just going to ask you a million questions and never tell you what I think. And this is what I say verbatim. If you ask me what I think, I will tell you, but I will usually start
Mhm.
by saying, what do you think first? So anyway, that's a
Yeah.
little bit of a long-winded part of I always will ask people what they think. I've kind of relinquished I have to be all-knowing.
Yeah.
And I think those are some of the tools that I've been using mostly.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a hard thing for people at the beginning of coaching as they start that journey to let go of is like your job isn't to come and give them lots of advice. Your job is help them sometimes just realize the truth that they already know that they just haven't been able to sit down and reflect on and get like realize for themselves.
I always tell people if you want advice, hire a consultant.
As a coach over the years, so from 2018, 2019 till now, you've had a number of clients, right? And often the coaches I speak to, there's a handful of stories that they have of some of the transformation that's gone on in their coaching that they with their leaders. Do you mind sharing a story? Not no names, no specific names, right? But is there anybody in mind where that you think of and transformed from the work that you guys did together?
Well, all of my clients, David. Ha ha. Um, yes, there is one in particular. We've been working together for, let's say it's 3 years. I don't know the exact time frame, but it's been a while, and I think
Mhm.
it has been 3 years.
Yeah.
He is a chief at his company,
Mhm.
and I'm just making that face. It's funny because we came together under something that a lot of coaches don't like to coach to, and it was remedial. The
Mm.
the coachee, the chief, not an incident, had a situation where his anger played out in a way that resulted
Mhm.
in an investigation that they couldn't
Mhm.
substantiate, but it was also substantiated enough that it was a problem. It
Yeah.
being his behavior, the way he spoke to people, his tone, it was all rooted in anger. And I only know this because we worked together, right? So over these 3 years, the transformation that's happened is we've uncovered the source of the anger. We've
Mm.
utilized a number of different tools, techniques, tips, and tricks of how to recognize when The anger is boiling within him, how to
Mhm.
mitigate some of that stuff, coping mechanisms, ways to de-escalate. He's had some epiphanies that have come from like, and I'm gonna curse here. He's like, I think he said to me at some point, I can't believe I almost fucked up my dream job. He came to that
Mhm.
through perspective, questions, introspection, all the things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He has different conversations with his spouse and his children. He recognizes that when he comes home, there are some days where the kids are crazy and he loves it. And there's other days
Yeah.
where he doesn't. But he also
Yeah.
recognizes they're kids. And all they're going to remember is dad is always angry unless he can speak differently, act differently, cope differently. So
Mhm.
his transformation has been holistic. And we still talk
Yeah.
about the same techniques. And it's not like it's like, we're talking about the same techniques. It is, how are you using these techniques? How are they working today? What hasn't worked today?
Mhm.
Literal and figurative. Hopefully I answered that well. I mean, it's such a deep transformation for him. And it's a great
Yeah.
story. It really is.
I think, and those are, I think, some of the best stories because you come in to help somebody with a problem that's occurring in the business, but this is a common theme that's coming through all of the conversations I'm having is people are people in a business and outside of the business. The problems that they have inside of the business all often translate into their life outside. And so when they start making that change inside the business, it's holistic. It changes them from the business and in their personal life. And I think that's where it's really like, yes, great. Let's work on the business. Let's make the business work better. But being able to transform and be part of somebody's life where you change them and impact their life, their family, I think that's beautiful because I think a lot of people who get into coaching, they get into it because they feel that there's a purpose in that, and that's to help people. And you're not just helping them in their business, but with their family. And that's that quite frankly could transform that family from something something like anger issues impacts the kids as they grow up to become adults, but that could also end up like where families will become will just shatter and break apart too. So not to to go overboard with it, but the work that you've done could have kept that marriage together and helped those kids and their future because now their father is more mentally healthy and able to understand and control themselves. So that's fantastic.
Yeah,
I mean,
if
yeah.
I can just comment on that real quick is, and you
Mhm.
already said it, I'm just going to say it in my own words.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be 50 this year, and I only share that as a timestamp because earlier in my career, there really was a sentiment of quote unquote, check your emotions at the door. And it seemed
Mm.
like a lot of people embrace that. As I said, I have FOMO, and one of the reasons I love being a coach is I'm in all the conversations, right? And what I say to
Yeah.
people is if we're partnered together, right, I'm going to apply the coaching skill set the way I do. I have certain
Mhm.
messages, ways that I show up, ways that I coach to in a sense, right? And one of those
Yeah.
ways is about speaking up. But more to the point is what I say to my clients is you are a holistic being. I'm
Mhm.
just looking at you, David, and I know just a little bit about you, right? You're a son, and we're all sons and daughters, right? You're a son, you're a father, you're a
Yeah.
husband,
Yeah.
you're an entrepreneur, you're a tech expert, right?
Mhm.
So right there, without knowing you all that well, you play at least five
Yeah.
roles every single day. If one
Mhm.
of those roles is out of whack, I'm willing to bet it's going to affect all of them. And when I tell stories to my clients, what I say is, I don't know about you, but if Rachel and I are having a fight, even though you may
Yeah.
not know we've had a fight because I'm still showing up as me, my brain is processing, right?
Yeah.
There is some effect or impact when life is out of harmony. Now,
Yeah.
listen, life is not always in harmony. Let's not be extreme in the same sense,
Yeah.
right? Not toxic positivity here. But in the same token,
Yeah.
is when things are really out of whack, it affects everything. So, quote unquote, checking your
Yeah.
emotions at the door is absurd.
I mean, as much as we try to compartmentalize every life impacts and seeps into every facet of life, right? So, I mean, as you were saying, like when you first were asking and like, what are you thinking about to your direct report? They're talking about their life.
Mhm.
On the flip side of talking about one of the lives of transformation, right? I'm sure you've had difficult situations to deal with as well with your clients. How have you handled some of the difficult situations with clients?
I'm just laughing because I remember through the training with CTI, at some point it came up about quote unquote firing a client. It's actually a pretty cool milestone. Like,
Mhm,
I've had some coach friends who are, newer to the industry and some that are longer in the industry, and
mhm,
there is an element of celebration, like, "Oh my god, David, you fired your first client. Nice job. Way to hit that milestone." And that when you ask the question, that's what's came up to me. The last client I fired might have been the first one, but I don't remember that to be absolutely true. She and I, we couldn't get it together in the sense that she wasn't hearing, I don't want to say my message because it makes me sound like I'm an advice giver, but in the same token, she wasn't
mhm.
resonating with my coaching. I was having a hard
Yeah,
time resonating with her lack, I'll rephrase, with my perception of her lack of action. I
yeah,
wasn't able to get deep enough with her to understand what was going on. And
yeah.
unfortunately, it got a little adversarial. I hate to say it, but that is the truth. And
Mhm,
so, what did I do with it? I spoke to my trusted confidants and asked questions about, have you experienced this? Any ideas for me? How do I approach this. I've tried
mhm,
that. I had my own coach me on it. And some of the coaching
mhm,
was really great. Like, I remember walking away from some of those coaching sessions and feeling like, oh, yeah, this was great. I have the new idea. Ultimately, we just weren't the right partnership. And it was Chrissy, yet again, who had helped me. Something she had said about the way to exit is to say something like, I feel like we've come to a natural conclusion, and I think it's time for us to part ways. And it was
mhm.
something, maybe that wasn't verbatim, but it was something with that tone
So
that felt very
yeah,
safe to say. And,
yeah,
the client at the time agreed, and it was
yeah,
an amicable split. And to be honest,
yeah.
I don't think we've ever spoken since.
I think that highlights like a very important truth and something that people need to also come to realize is that you don't need to work with or fix like you don't need to be the perfect coach for everybody, and it's okay not to be. I think it's a fact of life. As much as we want to be able to get along with everybody, there are just personalities you just don't connect with, and that's okay. And I think coaches should realize that, and instead of bearing through it and trying to make it work, just do the good that you can do. And if you're not the person to do that, just say, "We tried, that's fine, and let's try to get you connected with another coach who can work with you, who can speak with you in the way you need." It's hard for some people to be able to do that too because, there's again a certain level of maybe pride or feeling of like, I can do it all, so that it might be harder for other people, but I think that's also something important for coaches to realize. You don't need to be able to work with everybody. One other thing that you hit on there was you spoke to trusted confidants when you were having a hard time. Are those people also coaches that you were speaking to?
Primarily, yes.
So that's also like something that's very interesting to me because before I started doing these conversations with coaches, I didn't realize that a lot of coaches, I don't know why I didn't realize this, but a lot of the coaches who are coaching, they have other coaches to talk to when they have hard times. And I think it's really important. Are you doing this as like a is it more of an informal thing or is it like a like you guys have a group or how does that work for you?
For me personally, it is all right. My partner Rachel is a coach, right? So I go
Yeah.
home and I have a sounding board right there, right? Trusted confidant. There are three coaches that immediately come in my brain who
Mhm.
we straddle the fence of friendship and professional acquaintances. They're the people that I lean on. Sometimes
Yeah.
it is, David, I need you to coach me on this. Like, I'm having a really hard time. Can you give me 20 minutes, whatever? And the
Mhm.
three people I'm speaking of, because Rachel and I don't coach each other so well, but the other three people, they will do it for me, and vice
Yeah.
versa. Now,
Yeah.
it's a little further and farther between, but in the same token, is anytime I rely on these three, like, they are there for me and
Yeah.
vice versa. Sometimes it's as simple as like, how would you handle this situation? I got this, weird request, or
Mm.
someone's stretching my fee structure, or kind of what I was saying earlier about, like, I don't know how to get through to this client. Like, what do I do? Help me think about other
Mhm.
techniques. I mean, you asked me
Yeah.
earlier today about techniques from CTI, and I used some very basic ones, right? Like
Yeah.
CTI has one module that's called process, which is about
Mhm.
processing emotion. And
Mhm.
one of the three I'm talking about is exceptional in that space. And there's
Mhm.
another one that I forget what it's called, but it was more about perspective that I think I'm a little
Mm.
better in myself. So I lean there. These are other tools and techniques and methodologies. So anyway,
Yeah.
long-winded way to say is I have, four people that I rely on, and
Yeah.
I can tap them at any time, and they'll typically give me the time of day.
Yeah. And I think that's great. There's a lot of a multitude of things that we're going through, and having somebody to be a sounding board and to help you through or help you to process. Like coaches need coaches too, right?
Yes.
Transitioning the conversation a little bit more towards the business side of things. What's been something that's been really rewarding for you as you've been able to run your own business, your own coaching company?
Well, I think I was telling you earlier, I don't fancy myself a great corporate employee. And
Hmm.
one of there's a number of reasons for that. One is it's a lot of politics and drives me nuts. Two
Yeah.
is that, um, quite frankly, I see poor leadership. Poor leaders seem to promote up, and it really
Hmm.
begs the question, like how and why. And usually, the how and why is because they're good politicians, not so good at performing, in my opinion. Right?
Hmm.
Where am I going with this? As an entrepreneur, I'm the ultimate decision maker. And as a
Yeah.
self-respecting New Yorker, that's important for me. So that's very rewarding. Two is that,
Yeah.
as I was saying earlier, I have FOMO, right? I know
Yeah.
why decisions are made because I'm part of them. That's important for me. So being part of a decision is really important for me. Two is I celebrate all the wins.
Hmm.
If we make money,
Yeah.
I'm not splitting it with the corporation,
Yeah.
right? I'm splitting it amongst my folks. So,
Yeah.
there's a feel good about how revenue is shared, how we're putting money back out into the universe, so to speak. I would, those two things for me really is
Hmm.
it's being part of all of the decisions and knowing
Yeah.
that, and the other thing I didn't say too is okay, yes, we celebrate the wins or I get to celebrate the win because I'm part of them. But there's also
Yeah.
I'll say mourning of the losses, right?
Mhm.
Entrepreneurship is the pro of those wins, but the con of like, how do you get more money? Where do you get your clients
Yeah.
from? There's not a stable
Yeah.
paycheck until you get repeatable and consistent leads. It's
Yeah.
it's a double-sided coin.
Yeah. And I think so when I talk to coaches, especially people who are starting out, there's this kind of belief of I'm a coach, the clients will just kind of come. And you've been in it long enough that you realize no, that's not the truth. There are things that you need to do to get clients to come. But when you were starting out, what were some of the things that you did to start to get like your first clients in the door? You didn't become a coach to be a marketer. But if you want to build a sustainable business, you need a system that works for you while you're coaching. Coach Ops is designed to help you go from unpredictable referrals to a reliable marketing system without it feeling pushy or salesy. If you're ready to build something systematic, visit kyber5.com/coach ops.
All right, so I'm a former human resources guy, and I spent a lot of time in
Hmm.
recruiting. So I knew about the job search process.
Yeah.
Because of that, the first, flag in the ground I put is as a career coach, I help job seekers.
Hmm.
And I remember some of my cohort, I forgot, I don't know the word to say, but they were like almost saying like, "Well, you're a former HR guy. Of course, it's super easy for you to be a career coach." And they were
Hmm.
right to a degree. I mean, there was some linearity to it, if that's even a word. Um, but it wasn't that easy to get clients. It was just easy to say like, this is a niche, so to speak. So the
Yeah.
first client came from next door, as I mentioned. In March
Yeah.
of 2019, I spoke
Hmm.
to a networking group of job seekers. The company
Hmm.
that hosted that networking group just so happened to provide, amongst other things, career coaching. And
Hmm.
they asked me if I wanted to be a contract coach for them, which I did. So, really, in relatively short order, I had
Yeah.
the formation of a niche with job seekers. And then I had this agency doing all the BD, and I showed up
Yeah.
as the coach. So I got a lot of practice real early, and that turned out to be a really nice ramp for me. It gave me income when I wasn't having a lot of it. It gave me hours that got me closer to my certification. It got me
Yeah.
practice. So that was a big win early. I did a bunch of speaking, mostly for
Yeah.
free. So refining message, getting comfortable speaking in front of an audience. Do I
Yeah.
think that really moved the needle in terms of revenue and client acquisition? No, unfortunately, not for me. It didn't. I got some certifications along the way and some behavioral assessments that, gave me a little more to offer certain
Yeah.
clients. Um, what I would say, if folks listening are considering entrepreneurship, is there wasn't one thing for me. There was a lot of little
Mhm.
things with some
Yeah.
maybe bigger things like being a contract coach where they did have a sales engine and they did have lots of business. And so I was
Yeah.
busy, but maybe the con to that is I didn't quite figure out how to do my own BD to the extent where
Mhm.
maybe I have contract coaches at some point, right?
So that I think what I see there that I'm kind of taking away is getting out there to create visibility for yourself. So speaking engagements. So even finding that speaking engagement with the career coaching company, that was an opportunity. Opportunities kind of come in all shapes and sizes, but you have to be able to or willing to kind of get in front of people to start and get that ball rolling. And some opportunities work, some don't, but that's also part of the a business is not everything is going to work out the way you hope, but sometimes when it does work out, it does work out better than you expected to. In your business, as you're managing and running your business, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, often you have to wear all of these different hats, right? You're especially at the beginning, you're the CEO, you're doing the marketing, you're doing sales, you're doing accounting, and you're still doing service delivery. How have you how have you managed that in the beginning, and how do you manage that now?
I'm just laughing because I remember when I first became an entrepreneur, I came out of corporate America, right? And
Mhm.
so part of my identity was I worked for this company. And I was also in recruiting. So there's a lot of outbound. Hey, David, I work for XYZ company. We have a job. Are you interested? And if
Yeah.
you said no, maybe I was annoyed at times, but I never took it personal because I was always
Mhm.
representing XYZ company. The
Yeah.
biggest hurdle out of the gates was getting used to I am selling me. And if you say no, you are saying no to me, which has an element of dating to it. So like there's some
Mhm. Yeah.
parallel to am I attractive enough? Am I desirable enough? Like why don't you like me? Why
Yeah.
don't you want to hire me? Right? That
Yeah.
was the
Yeah. Yeah.
first big hurdle. So that gets into messaging and having thicker
Mhm.
skin and trying not to take things personal. More in the
Yeah.
objective. When I first started, I had one business credit card. And so every
Mhm.
expense went on it. And not
Mhm.
that I'm a great accountant. And at the end of the year, I went through all those expenses and I coded them. I gave them my CPA. Right. Having a
Mhm.
CPA was important because I didn't want to screw up my taxes. Then I got to a certain level where doing that credit card reconciliation got to be a little cumbersome. And I
Yeah.
found a bookkeeper. And now the bookkeeper does the books still to this day. And then they give it to the
Yeah.
CPA, and that's lovely. When I first started, I asked friends who were good at a variety of things if they'd be willing to help,
Mhm.
whether it was for free or a
Yeah.
reduced fee. And many of them
Yeah.
did. So, website, writing, having some idea of brand. Like, I was like, what is
Mhm.
brand? Like, all right, colors, but there was a lot more to it, right? Um,
Yeah.
there were certain vendors for messaging. Like I remember an
Mhm.
early vendor did a bunch of SEO stuff, and an
Mhm.
early vendor tried doing a LinkedIn messaging campaign. So there's a lot of these, and I could be frugal, and so I'll go
Yeah.
hunting, and I'm also not afraid to ask if you'd be willing to reduce your fee. So I
Yeah.
do all those things. Um, But I will say one of the most interesting things about being an entrepreneur is in very short order, it shines the brightest spotlight on your weaknesses.
Mm.
And what I've seen is the people that try to fight it are the ones that struggle
Yeah.
mightily and they get really sucked into, well, I'm not good at, I'll just say accounting. I'm not good at accounting.
Yeah.
So I need to try to be better. And I got to figure out these books. And they go so deep down the rabbit hole, which I don't think is the
Yeah.
greatest use of time,
Hmm.
where, you know, back up a little bit. Can you find someone to do
Yeah.
it? Sorry, last
Yeah.
thing I'll say here is there's Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy are two
Hmm.
authors that pair up quite a bit. And they
Yeah.
have a book, but also a philosophy, which is who, not how, right? Who is going to do this thing, not how am I
Hmm.
going to do this thing? And that's been real, not necessarily transformational, but it's real foundational for me these days.
Yeah. I think that's really good because at the beginning, you need to try to. I think to a certain extent, you should know how to do each part of the thing in the business. But when you're trying to run a business, you cannot do everything, and it's better for you especially from a time management point of view, to hand that off to somebody who one they excel at that thing, but probably enjoy it a lot better than you do. So I definitely, when it comes to accounting, I would rather fight an alligator than handle the books. So, as you're running your business, especially in this day and age, right, with AI and all of these different technology and tools, are there any systems or tools that you're using today that helps you in your coaching business?
I gotta tell you, man, I'm pretty basic on the technology front. I'm not
Hmm.
using a CRM. I use Outlook to my benefit. I
Yep.
was taught a system in Outlook that uses tasks that, quite frankly, works really well for me. Now, it
Yeah.
only works as well as I do it, right? So the CRM is not prompting me. Like I haven't set a rule that says every six
Yeah.
months, give me these names or whatever CRMs do. So I got to be honest. No, there's not a lot of. I mean, I use QuickBooks to
Okay.
generate my
Yeah.
invoices and accept payment. It says
Yeah.
expensive with their fees as everybody else that takes it 3% or whatever it is. No, I don't use a lot of technology beyond the basics.
Looking back at your coaching career so far, if you could have done anything differently, what's one thing that you would have done differently if you could speak to yourself?
In retrospect, I know very well why I didn't choose a niche for
Hmm.
the executives we coach. And in retrospect, I wish I would have just chose one. As we've had some of our conversations, David, and across my business travels, amongst many entrepreneurs I speak to, depending on what they do, if there's a
Hmm.
lack of a natural niche, a lot of us struggle with choosing one. Part
Hmm.
of it is the scarcity mindset. If I'm too specialized, I'm not going to get any business. So I got to cast this wider net. And I think that's the
Yeah.
folly in the thought is yes, the wider net may catch a bunch of stuff, but is it catching the right
Yeah.
stuff? So I've
Yeah.
I've generally been a generalist, and I wish I would have chosen a niche sooner.
Okay. What is one piece of advice well, I guess this could also apply, but what's one piece of advice that you'd give to somebody who's beginning their coaching journey?
I think as I reflect back, what I don't remember enough people saying is tap your network as deep and wide as possible. And I think that has a multifaceted reason. There's a multifaceted reason for that. Number one, I think the obvious is business development and lead generation.
Mhm.
So many of us talk about how great it is to get referrals, and it's true. And the way we get referrals are the people that know us the best. And the people that know us the best are our former colleagues, friends, family, etc.
Yeah.
As a little bit of a sidebar to that, what is interesting is the people that many of us think are definitely going to help us do not. And the people who are like, yeah, fine, I'll reach out to David. Maybe he'll offer a helping hand. Like they go, bend over backwards to help you. It's this really interesting phenomenon. So the advice I would give is go deep and wide in your network. Let people know
Yeah.
what you do.
Mm.
Ask for help.
Mm.
It's another piece of advice with your network and elsewhere. I remember when I first became an entrepreneur, it was like this secret, which
Yeah.
is after almost every meeting, the person I was sitting across from would say, what can I do to help you? And of
Mm.
course, in my immaturity, I said, I need clients. The worst thing to say, right? It It wasn't until then I reciprocated and someone said to me, "I'm growing my business in X, and I'd appreciate any introductions to that person." I was like,
Mhm.
"Boom, that's the answer."
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
part of the advice is don't be afraid to ask for help and be
Yeah.
specific. The specificity that I think works best is introductions.
Mhm.
Who could you introduce me to? Or, hey, David, I looked through your LinkedIn and I saw you're connected with some people at XYZ company or by name.
Yeah.
Do you know them well enough? Would you be willing to make an intro?
Yeah.
So that was something that took me, a few twists and turns to figure out.
Mhm.
I think those are the
Yeah,
best
I
pieces.
love that. I mean, referrals, it's funny that I think that people are sometimes afraid to tell others when they're starting a new endeavor like this, when they're starting in like a new business. And personally too, when I started, I didn't really shout it out or tell people, and so no one really knew what I was doing. And I wonder if, well, so this is for my own self-reflection. Was I just, fearful of it? Was I afraid of failure? I don't know. I need to spend a little bit of time on that, but I think there's a hurdle there that we need, that when people are looking into starting a business, they need to just overcome, because you're starting a business and you need to get the word out that you're doing it. Before we wrap up, I'd love to know what's next for you and your business. What are you thinking about for your next maybe 1 to 2 years, or your 5-year roadmap, if you have something like that?
A lot of our work has been one-on-one, and it is
Mhm.
it is wonderful. It truly is.
Yeah.
Where we're starting to play a bit more and where I think, well, where I'd like to play even more is in the
Hmm.
team dynamic. Coaching
Mm.
a leader at a time is, let's say it's micro, right?
Hmm.
One-on-one, you change, great. And there is an element
Yeah.
of the high tide raises all boats, right? If you level up,
Hmm.
if you elevate, if you improve, then
Hmm.
there is some downstream. The reason I
Yeah.
say micro is maybe it's a little bit smaller, it's a little narrower, maybe it's not quite
Yeah.
as um, fast or as massive as the macro, which is team dynamics. When I think about the C-suite folks that we coach, like, they are the top of the
Hmm.
food chain at their company. They're making the
Hmm.
decisions. They're not making decisions. They are creating culture. They're doing all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
What I've learned is that a lot of folks who are lower down the totem pole look up and they think they have all the answers. They have all the fun. They're doing all the things. But what's
Hmm.
happening behind closed doors is they're quite, let me rephrase, they're as dysfunctional as everybody else. And the problem
Hmm.
is their dysfunction affects the entire company. Now, with that
Yeah.
being said, is so many companies are so still successful in light of that or in spite of that.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that if they could resolve certain things, the way they
Hmm.
debate, the way they brainstorm, the way they make decisions, the way they don't talk about each other behind their back, the way that they hold
Hmm.
each other accountable, right? The way that they
Hmm.
maybe reduce ego, the way
Yeah.
that they maybe don't have to be the loudest or the smartest person in the room. That maybe my
Yeah.
role sometimes is simply to support you, David, even though maybe I don't
Yeah.
agree with your decision, but we're colleagues and I want us all to be successful. So I'm
Yeah.
going down my narrative here a little bit, but the future of our business, where we're starting to focus more energy, is having a greater impact by coaching teams in the group
Mm.
setting and in a one-on-one setting, and watching how that whole team then elevates and then
Yeah.
exponentially those below as well.
Right. That's really exciting. I think there is so much more impact and so much more that you can do in when you're doing that group coaching, that team coaching. Um, and once you kind of crack that service proposition, I think that'll really help, with the business as well, right? Because the business becomes more profitable when you're doing group coaching, you serve more people at the same time, and you can end up charging more for work. So for 1 hour, you can charge for more because you're doing group coaching. So I am not saying that in a great way. I didn't even think about this. So team coaching is great because one, you can impact more people, but you can also, from the business side of things, uh, increase your revenue at the same time. So I think there's multiple benefits when you can crack that. Darren, I really appreciate your time. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where you guys move in the future.
Thank you, Dave. It was nice talking to you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Want to stop guessing and start building a marketing system that actually fills your calendar? Head to kyber5.com/coachops and let's get systematic. That's it for today's episode. I hope you grabbed something useful you can actually apply in your business. If you did, leave a comment or share it with a friend. And hit subscribe if you haven't already. I'll catch you next week.